except for the death penalty, murder portion, which directly contradicts the New Testament principles as well as what punishment actually means. Death is never punishment in reality. Well, it may not be a punishment, but it is certainly a deterrent. Some of you might be wondering, what is the biblical stance for the death penalty? And this might be a good time to talk about it. So first off, we need to read Romans chapter 13. It says, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Yes, even the corrupt ones are there for whatever God's reason is. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For the rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Will you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain." Yes, the sword. "For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer." Okay, so, and it goes on to talk about submission to authorities. And people will say, well, what if the authorities contradict God? Well, we have that answer in this passage in Acts, where basically Peter says, you judge whether we should obey God or men. So as long as the authorities are not telling us to do anything unbiblical, then we're going to obey them as God asks us to. But my point in this passage is the sword. The sword in this passage is a euphemism for capital punishment. He's saying that God accepts and has actually instituted these governments that use capital punishment. And believe me, God himself instituted capital punishment in the Old Testament. There is a long list of things that would require death, not the least of which is murder, kidnapping, child sacrifice, adultery, grape, daughter of a priest who became a prostitute, an idolater, premarital sex, bestiality, a false prophet, a false witness, disobedient son, child who strikes his father or mother, child who curses his father or mother, hitting a pregnant woman and causing her to lose her baby, a sorceress, a medium or spiritist, a family member who entices you to go after other gods, a blasphemer, or any non-Levite who attempted to take down the tabernacle. Now you might say, well, those rules were for Israel. Yeah, but that's still the point, is that he actually instituted capital punishment for them. So why do we have a problem with non-Christian governments using capital punishment for a deterrent? As corrupt as some of the governments in Africa are, Africa has some of the lowest grape rates in the world because they will publicly hang someone who's caught doing it. So I'm not saying that Christians need to go out and exercise that capital punishment, but I am saying it's okay if the government does.